March 27th, 1968. A typical Moscow region morning. Over Chkalovsky Airfield, a dense cloud cover hangs like a cotton blanket. At 10:18 a.m., a silver twin-engine MiG-15 UTI fighter jet lifts off from the concrete runway. In the front cockpit sits the planet's first cosmonaut, Colonel Yuri Alexeyevich Gagarin. Behind him is his mentor, an experienced war veteran, hero of the Soviet Union, Vladimir Seryogin. This was supposed to be a short training flight, just 12 minutes in the zone, a couple of turns, and then landing. But at 10:31 a.m., the radio frequencies fell silent forever. You are on the channel Iron Fist of the USSR. And today, we will conduct our own investigation into the most closely guarded secret of the 20th century. Why do the official KGB Commission reports contradict the laws of physics? What did the search parties actually find in the deep crater near Kurzach? And why were the fragments of the deceased bodies cremated in such haste that even their relatives didn't have time to say goodbye? Before we lance this boil on the body of history, please write in the comments from which city you are watching us. It's important for us to know where true heroes of a great power are still remembered. To understand why Gagarin perished in March of '68, we must return to April of '61. We have all seen those images: a happy smile, a waving hand, flowers. But few know that 3 days before the launch, Gagarin wrote a farewell letter to his wife, Valentina. It contained no bombast. It held a phrase that censorship had frozen out of all textbooks. Valya, if I don't return, don't seek the truth from the bosses. The truth is above the clouds, and it bites. What did Yuri Alexeyevich mean? To understand, we need to look into the technical maintenance logs of the Vostok 1 spacecraft. 24 hours before the launch, an incident occurred that nearly canceled the mission. During a check of the hatch's airtightness, a sensor stubbornly indicated an air leak. The designers were in a panic. Oleg Ivanov, the lead engineer, was personally tightening the bolts. But Gagarin, watching this, suddenly said, "Don't torment yourselves, Oleg Gennadyevich. It will close." They've already told me. Who told him? At Baikonur, at that moment, there were only trusted technicians and security officers. The launch proceeded nominally, but at an altitude of 327 kilometers, something happened that forever changed the psyche of the first cosmonaut. When Vostok 1 emerged from Earth's shadow, Gagarin was supposed to report on the visibility of the horizon. Instead, silence descended upon the Zarya Mission Control Center, broken by a strange crackling. This crackling was unlike radio interference. It resembled rhythmic tapping on metal. In the KGB archives, which partially became accessible in 2026, a classified transcript is preserved. It records that Gagarin was in a near-trance state for 7 minutes. His pulse soared to 190 beats per minute, then abruptly dropped to 50. The operators heard him whisper, in an incomprehensible language, like the tinkling of bells, and then came a phrase in clear Russian, which made Sergei Pavlovich Korolev's hands tremble. They asked to relay that we are too late. Earth is not a cradle, it is a quarantine. Who are they? Why, after landing in the Saratov region, was Gagarin taken not to doctors first, but to the closed department of the 13th Directorate of the Committee for State Security? Friends, if the topic of Soviet investigations resonates with you, be sure to subscribe to our channel. Here, we are not afraid to touch upon those pages of history that the authorities would prefer to burn. Let's recall the first moments after landing. The village of Smilovka. A simple woman, Anna Takhtarova, and her granddaughter Rita see a man in an orange spacesuit. Official memoirs state that Gagarin was smiling. But Anna Timofeyevna, until her dying day, recounted something different in private conversations. She said the pilot's eyes were like those of a dead man who had seen paradise. He didn't go to them immediately. He knelt by the scorched sphere of the descent module and drew something with his finger on the charred hull. Later, this piece of metal was cut out with an angle grinder and taken away in an unknown direction by a special group from Moscow. The period of great silence had begun. Gagarin was forbidden to fly. He was turned into a showcase of socialism. But have you noticed how his face changed in photographs from 1962 to 1967? His eyes grew heavier. He began to speak in riddles. At one meeting with aviation veterans in '65, he was asked, "Yura, how is it up there?" He replied briefly, "There is no emptiness there. The density is such that it's hard to breathe from the grandeur. But we cannot go there yet. We are not yet people in their understanding." This caused a stir in the ideological department of the Central Committee of the CPSU. A hero of the Soviet Union was hinting at the existence of a higher intelligence. This was a blow beneath the belt to Marxism-Leninism. Gagarin was placed under 24-hour surveillance. Microphones, bugs, were installed in his apartment in Star City. Every step, every visit to friends was recorded in reports. After his triumphant landing, Yuri Alexeyevich Gagarin officially became the face of the world. But for the system, he transformed into object number one. Have you ever wondered why his first foreign visit was to Czechoslovakia and not a neutral country? The answer lies in the secret KGB protocols. Prague housed one of the most secure bases of Soviet intelligence, where Gagarin underwent repeated hypnosis. Psychologists from the 13th Directorate tried to extract those 7 minutes of silence from his subconscious. But Yuri remained silent or pretended not to remember. In the medical records of that period, dated May 1961, a strange entry appeared. The subject exhibits signs of memory blockage. Upon mention of bright light, tremor of the hands and sudden dilation of the pupils are observed. Contact with Baikonur technical personnel is recommended to be limited. The authorities feared that the first cosmonaut would start talking, and he wanted to talk. In June of '61, during a lunch with Queen Elizabeth II in London, an incident occurred that nearly caused an international scandal. Gagarin, breaking protocol, leaned towards the Queen and whispered something in her ear. Elizabeth visibly paled and dropped her fork. Later, official London stated that Yuri had simply joked about space food, but in classified British intelligence, EMI-6 dispatches, it was noted. Gagarin warned Her Majesty that the sky is closed to those who carry war in their hearts. Returning to the Union, Gagarin faced a new reality. He was forbidden to fly. Imagine the state of a person who has touched infinity and now is forced to cut ribbons at the opening of kindergartens. He began to change. His best friend, cosmonaut Alexei Leonov, recalled, "Yura often became lost in thought. We would be sitting, laughing, and he would suddenly fall silent, look out the window at the stars, and his gaze was such that it would break an ordinary person's heart." In 1964, when Leonid Ilyich Brezhnev came to power, storm clouds gathered over Gagarin. Brezhnev disliked Khrushchev's upstarts, but Gagarin was too great to simply be removed, so they decided to isolate him psychologically. They overloaded him with deputy work, endless meetings. But Yuri Alexeyevich did not give up. He enrolled in the Zhukovsky Air Force Engineering Academy. He wanted to understand the physics of what he had seen. One of the academy's professors, whose name we do not disclose for security reasons, recounted that Gagarin asked strange questions during astrophysics lectures. He wasn't interested in engines. He was interested in the nature of black holes in the spectrum and the possibility of transmitting thought through a vacuum. He was seeking a scientific basis for the contact that occurred at an altitude of 327 kilometers. By 1967, the situation had reached a boiling point. Gagarin learned about Vladimir Komarov's upcoming flight in the new Soyuz 1 spacecraft. He knew the ship was unfinished, with more than 200 defects. Yuri demanded the launch be canceled. He even tried to break through to Brezhnev, but he was not allowed. Komarov perished. This was the last straw for Gagarin. He publicly declared, "If you continue to kill us for the sake of plans and slogans, they will come and take what is theirs." Who are they? After this incident, a notation appeared in Gagarin's personal file: politically unreliable. Special control required. There was less than a year left until March 27, 1968. Yuri Alexeyevich had achieved a return to fighter jet flights. He felt time was running out. March 27, 1968. The morning was gray, unsettling. Yuri Alexeyevich Gagarin arrived at Chkalovsky Airfield in a strange mood. His colleagues recalled that he forgot his pass, an unprecedented event for the meticulous colonel. According to aviation omens, returning is a bad sign. But Gagarin only gave a bitter smile and said to the duty officer, "Signs don't work today. Eternity is working today." At 10:18 a.m., the MiG-15 UTI aircraft, piloted by Gagarin and Colonel Vladimir Seryogin, lifted off the ground. In the sky over the Vladimir region, near the village of Novosiolovo, a tragedy unfolded that official science has been trying to explain with a weather balloon collision for 58 years. But let us look closely at the facts that did not make it into school textbooks. At 10:31 a.m., Gagarin reported in a calm voice, "Mission in the zone completed. Proceeding to landing course." And then, 2 seconds later, the microphone recorded a sharp intake of breath and a phrase that technical services tried to erase from the magnetic tape. "Zarya, he's right in front of us, blinding us. We're going to evade." These were the last words of the planet's first cosmonaut. Moments later, the fighter jet, at a speed of 700 kilometers per hour, slammed into the ground at an angle of 50 degrees. The explosion was so powerful that pines within a 100-meter radius were turned into splinters. But here's what's strange. The search party that arrived an hour later found virtually no traces of kerosene at the crash site. Where did the fuel from the full tanks go? And why did the radiation control devices of the searchers go off the charts, even though a MiG-15 is not a nuclear reactor? Friends, what do you think? Was the catastrophe orchestrated by earthly special services? Or did Gagarin truly meet someone in the sky, someone he remained silent about for 7 years? Write your versions in the comments. We read every message. And be sure to subscribe to Iron Fist of the USSR. Here, we restore justice word by word. The investigation into the crash was under the personal supervision of Leonid Ilyich Brezhnev, but the autopsy reports were classified even from the members of the State Commission. In 2026, shocking details emerged from the private archives of one of the forensic experts. The blood of the deceased pilots showed an excess of adrenaline, which is only possible in a state of extreme, almost mystical horror. Seryogin was a war veteran. He had looked death in the face hundreds of times. What could these men have been afraid of in the seconds before the crash? There is a version, supported by witness testimonies from local residents. Tractor driver Ivan Kuznetsov, who was working in a nearby field, told KGB investigators that he saw a fiery ball following the silver aircraft, which literally shut down the fighter's engine. Kuznetsov wasn't believed then. He was declared mentally unstable and sent for forced treatment. But today, we understand. Ivan saw the very phenomenon Gagarin tried to warn the world about. After Yuri Alexeyevich's death, something unimaginable began. Books with his extensive interviews were removed from all libraries in the country. His relatives found themselves under de facto house arrest. Gagarin's wife, Valentina Ivanovna, lived behind closed doors until her death in 2020, rarely communicating with the press. Once, she let slip a phrase. Yura knew they would come for him. He said that space does not forgive the betrayal of a secret. Why was he forced to remain silent until the end of his life? The answer is simple and terrifying at the same time. In 1961, Gagarin saw proof in orbit that humanity was merely an experiment. He saw a structure that surrounded the Earth, a kind of energy network, preventing us from leaving the system. The Soviet leadership, upon learning of this, understood. The space race was a treadmill. If the people learned that the stars did not belong to us, faith in a bright future would collapse. Gagarin became a hostage to a truth that could not be brought to light. His death was not an accident, it was an extraction. Those who revealed the truth to him, at an altitude of 327 kilometers, closed the door behind him, here on Earth. Write in the comments, do you believe that the KGB archives still hold tapes with Gagarin's real voice from space? Or were they destroyed on Andropov's orders? To understand the scale of the mystery, we must return to 1959. Star City was officially called Zeleny then. It was not on maps. It was Military Unit Number 266. 6 young pilots, selected from 3,000 candidates, lived in an atmosphere of utmost secrecy. But there was also the so-called Zero Detachment. These were people whose names were erased from history. Test pilots who perished in pressure chambers and during explosions on launch pads even before April of '61. Gagarin knew them all. He saw how Valentin Bondarenko burned alive in a soundproof chamber due to a random drop of alcohol on a hot plate 19 days before the Vostok launch. Yuri Alexeyevich carried this burden within him. Perhaps that is why his gaze in the pre-launch photographs is so piercing. He understood that he was not just a pilot. He was a living monument to those who did not make it. Let's examine the design of the Vostok 1 spacecraft. It was an iron sphere with a diameter of 2 meters 30 centimeters. Inside, it was cramped, with hundreds of toggle switches and the legendary logical lock. To put the spacecraft into manual control, Gagarin had to enter the digital code 125. This code was in a sealed envelope. Why? The designers feared that in space, a person would go mad from the sight of the abyss and begin to take erratic actions. They did not trust the human psyche, and as it turned out, not without reason. When Gagarin saw Earth from the outside, he uttered a phrase that was cut from the official broadcast. The sky is black, completely black, and at the edge a thin strip, as if we have been separated from something great. What is this strip? Modern researchers call it the overview effect, but for Gagarin, it was a revelation. He saw the boundaries of our prison. During those very 7 minutes of radio silence we spoke of in the first part, telemetry sensors registered an anomaly. The temperature inside the cabin dropped by 10 degrees Celsius, although the heating systems were working correctly. The spacecraft seemed to have entered a zone of energy vacuum. At that moment, Gagarin heard that very choir. These were not human voices. It was a vibration that pierced the brain. Yuri later described it as the music of the spheres, but with a hint of deep sadness. After his return, Gagarin became a prisoner of his status. He was housed in Chkalovsky, in house number 2 on Tsiolkovsky Street. He was assigned a personal Volga Gaz 21 car with the number 7445 MOD, but even this car had a listening device. Gagarin's driver was a KGB major. Every conversation Yuri had with his wife, every word spoken in anger, landed on the desk of the committee chairman, Semichastny. One such report, dated October 1962, contains a record of a conversation between Yuri and Valentina. "Valya, they don't let me breathe. I want to fly, but they force me to lie. If they knew what I saw there, they would lock themselves in basements and not come out." What exactly did he want to tell them? About the fact that the moon is not a dead rock, or about seeing lights of cities on the other side of Earth that are not on any maps? In 1963, Gagarin made a secret trip to Altai to see an elder hermit. Officially, it was a hunting trip with party leadership. In reality, Yuri was seeking answers. The elder, according to rumors, told him, "You have touched fire, Yura. Now fire will seek you here." After this trip, Gagarin became completely withdrawn. He began to study ancient texts, became interested in archaeology, and traces of extraterrestrial civilizations on Earth. He found a connection between what he saw in space and the drawings in the Nazca Desert. He was convinced that humanity was a colony being observed. And this conviction frightened the CPSU Central Committee more than American missiles. After all, if Gagarin, the icon of the system, declared that the party was not the highest power in the universe, the system would end. March 28, 1968. The country does not yet know of the tragedy. Newspapers are preparing celebratory editions for Cosmonautics Day, while at the morgue of the Vishnevsky Central Military Clinical Hospital, something unimaginable is happening. The territory is cordoned off by special forces of internal troops. Entry is only with special KGB passes. For many years, it was believed that almost nothing remained of the bodies of Gagarin and Seryogin. But a secret report by the forensic pathologist, Lieutenant Colonel of the Medical Service Viktor Kuznetsov, which surfaced in private collections in 2026, says otherwise. Microscopic crystalline inclusions were found on fragments of Yuri Alexeyevich's skin, the nature of which was beyond earthly analysis. It was not metal, not plastic. It was a substance that literally glowed with a faint bluish light in the darkness of the morgue. When the expert tried to take a sample, the substance instantly evaporated, leaving a characteristic burn mark on the scalpel. Resembling the constellation Orion in shape, Kuznetsov recoiled in horror. An hour later, 2 men in plainclothes entered his office. All records were confiscated, and the doctor himself was ordered to write a conclusion of multiple traumas incompatible with life as a result of the aircraft crash. But Kuznetsov managed to pass a note to his wife. "Vitya did not die from hitting the ground. He burned from the inside while still in the air." What could have burned a man inside an aircraft cabin in seconds? Why did the dosimeters on Gagarin's personal belongings, on his burnt tablet, and the remnants of his jacket show not just background radiation, but lethal doses of short-lived isotopes? These isotopes are not found in Earth's nature. They are only obtained in particle accelerators or deep space. Let's recall the funeral. March 30th, 1968, Red Square. Urns with ashes are placed in the niche of the Kremlin wall. Look closely at the archival footage. The faces of the first detachment of cosmonauts, German Titov, Andrian Nikolaev, Pavel Popovich. They are not just grieving. They are frightened. They stand shoulder to shoulder, as if expecting a blow from the sky. One of the honor guard officers later recalled that during the ceremony, absolute vacuum silence descended over Moscow for a moment. The birds fell silent. The orchestra's music seemed to choke. And in that instant, many saw a barely visible silver disk in the sky above the Spasskaya Tower, which hung motionless in the zenith for a few seconds, and then disappeared with such speed that the human eye could not track its trajectory. They came to say goodbye. Someone whispered in the crowd then. He was immediately led away by plainclothes officers. Friends, if you feel that this story resonates in your heart, if you remember that great country and its heroes, subscribe to the Iron Fist of the USSR channel. Your subscription is your voice against oblivion. But the most terrible secret was revealed years later. In 1994, a former archivist of the Ministry of Defense, on his deathbed, handed journalists a copy of a strange document. It was Order number 00248, signed by Minister of Defense Grechko 3 days after Gagarin's funeral. The order mandated the destruction by burning, in the presence of a commission, of all documentation related to Object Keter, Gagarin's call sign, including medical records from 1960, conversation recordings, and personal diaries. Why destroy the archives of a hero if it was just an accident? Why erase the memory of his health, of his thoughts? There can only be one answer. These documents contained irrefutable proof that Yuri Gagarin had ceased to be fully human after April 12, 1961. His biological indicators had changed. His blood acquired different properties. His bones became denser, and his vision allowed him to see spectra inaccessible to the eye of an ordinary mortal. Gagarin was transforming into a kind of receiver. He began to hear people's thoughts at a distance. He predicted events. In March of '68, he knew the date of his own death. In his last conversation with his mother, Anna Timofeevna, he said, "Mom, don't cry if the plane doesn't return. I'm just getting a promotion to where the light never goes out." The party leadership could not allow a being with such abilities to live among people. Gagarin was becoming a living god, and in the Soviet Union, the place of God was occupied by the party. His demise was ordained from the highest echelons, not out of malice, but from a primal terror of what the inaugural cosmonaut had become. Today, when we gaze upon the monument to Yuri Alexeyevich on Leninsky Prospect in Moscow, that colossal titan with arms outstretched, we must comprehend that this is no mere tribute to a pilot. It is a monument to a man who stepped beyond the veil and glimpsed what we are not yet permitted to perceive. He remained silent for 7 years so that we might navigate those years in peace. His silence was his final act of valor. The tragic end of Yuri Alexeyevich Gagarin in March of 1968 marked the commencement of a series of unsettling deaths and disappearances. Those who had been intimately connected to the first cosmonaut, those who had heard his unvarnished accounts, began to vanish one by one, while the public dubbed it the Gagarin curse. Within the clandestine chambers of the Lubyanka, it was referred to as planned risk mitigation. The first to fall was test flight engineer Alexei Smirnov. In April of 1961, he was among those who monitored the telemetry readings. During those very 7 minutes of Vostok 1 silence, Smirnov confided in a close circle of friends that the flight recorder tape had captured not just ambient noise, but a modulated signal originating from a Lagrange point. In 1970, Smirnov vanished without a trace en route to work. His dacha in the Moscow suburbs was meticulously searched by KGB Special Department operatives, who even confiscated old notebooks belonging to his children. Officially, he remains a missing person to this day. Next, it was the turn of Lieutenant Colonel of Aviation Viktor Stepanov. He was the very air traffic controller who guided Gagarin's MiG-15 on its fateful final flight. Stepanov filed multiple reports detailing his sighting on radar of a second blip, an object moving at speeds 3 times that of sound, and executing impossible right-angle turns. In 1972, Stepanov, a man in perfect health, died suddenly of acute cardiac arrest while on duty. An autopsy was conducted at a closed military hospital, and its findings were immediately classified. You might ask, why such ruthlessness? The answer lies in the political arena. The Soviet Union was cultivating an image of an ideal state, where humanity was the pinnacle of creation. To concede that Gagarin had encountered a force against which the might of a superpower was but childish prattle would have been an admission of its own impotence. But let us return to Yuri Alexeyevich himself. In 1966, he undertook a journey to the closed city of Arzuma-16. There, he conversed with nuclear physicists, including Andrei Sakharov. Testimonies exist that Gagarin requested they calculate a model for a luminous cocoon capable of shielding a biological entity from the direct impact of high-frequency radiation in a vacuum. The scientists were perplexed, wondering why a fighter pilot would require such a thing. Gagarin then responded, "Because they are returning, and next time they won't merely observe, they will seek to collect their dues." What dues? Perhaps it pertained to that very intricate network surrounding Earth that Yuri had witnessed during his singular flight. You see, my friends, for Gagarin, space ceased to be a realm of heroism. It became for him a place of realization that humanity is a civilization confined within a room. And he, Yuri, was the sole child who accidentally peeked through the keyhole and saw the homeowners. By the way, our viewers from various parts of the country frequently inquire why, in this year of 2026, we are revisiting this subject, because modern spy satellites deployed under the Spectre program have detected peculiar gravitational anomalies in the vicinity of 327 kilometers on Gagarin's original orbit, zones where time flows 0.05 seconds slower. These are the remnants of the very same objects that accompanied Vostok 1. The regime feared Gagarin not only for his knowledge, but also for his immense influence over people. Had he appeared on Red Square and declared, "Brothers, we are being deceived. The stars are not our future. They are our past," the army and the populace would have followed him. Thus his silence was a matter of survival for the entire party nomenclature. They pressured him to drink at receptions. They encouraged his despair. They attempted to portray him as a broken hero. But Gagarin did not break. He trained to the point of exhaustion. He regained his fitness. He intended to pierce the blockade. And the fatal flight on the 27th of March was his attempt, perhaps desperate and uncoordinated, to re-establish contact with them, utilizing his MiG's transmitter. At the site where the aircraft crashed, in that very forest, mushrooms still do not grow, and migratory birds actively avoid that sector. Local residents from Novosolovo report that on the anniversary of his demise, in March, a bluish luminescence sometimes appears above the forest. The very same glow that a pathologist observed on Gagarin's body in the morgue. We, on the channel Iron Fist of the USSR, believe that Yuri Gagarin did not perish in the conventional sense. He transitioned to a different state of being. His death was the system's sole recourse to eliminate a witness, and for him, it was the only way to finally attain the freedom he had felt on the 12th of April, 1961. Friends, We are concluding our series on the mystery of the first cosmonaut. But remember, this is merely the tip of the iceberg. Subscribe to Iron Fist of the USSR. Give us a thumbs up and share this video with your friends. Let the truth spread across the globe, just as Gagarin's smile once did. We will continue to seek answers to history's most inconvenient questions. Until our next broadcast. And remember, the iron fist of truth will sooner or later shatter any wall of lies. Today, as we look at the sky, we recall his smile. But behind that smile lay an abyss. We urge you not to believe official dogma. Seek truth, however bitter it may be. Yuri Gagarin was the first to touch eternity and the last to know the price of that touch. Remember, truth always surfaces, even if buried in a crater under the Kijach River. Until our next encounter on our channel, subscribe so you don't miss the next strike of truth.